There we go. So we'll just do it that way.
Okay.
Okay. So this is how we're going to do it. See, so we'll just do the Paul B show, and we'll just talk to you for a minute and 20, 30 minutes, and then that way. Okay, let me start it. I'm gonna start it by blowing my thing here. Hello, everyone. This is Ed Weiser, Reef Weiser at Reef to Reef, and we're having our first conversation with Paul B of the famous Paul B threads, who is gracious enough to show us his aquarium in the background, and we wanted to talk to him for a while on whatever he wants to talk about today. What would be good to talk about today, Paul?
Well, how about the immunity thing that we've been going on the thread with?
Okay. What is your thoughts, and I'll share some things about it.
My thoughts on immunity is I don't think fish should ever get sick. Never.
Uh-huh.
And I think, well, I used to think it was because of the live foods that I was feeding. I figured they had some kind of vitamins and minerals or something in there, and that was making the fish healthy, and they were spawning and everything, and I assumed that spawning fish didn't get sick. But then I started thinking it's the bacteria in the living food.
Mm-hmm.
Because as I was reading, the fish's immune system is much different than ours. We
Right.
make white blood cells from our bone marrow and our lymph nodes and all of that, but fish don't have that. They don't have bone marrow. As a matter
Right.
of fact, fish bones are not even connected together, but that's another story. And they make their white blood cells from their spleen and their kidney. They call it a head kidney because it goes down in underneath their gills in their head.
Mm-hmm.
And what they do is when they eat, the bacteria gets filtered through this kidney, and somehow it gets transferred into their immune system, and then their immune system recognizes the threat, and they become immune to it eventually. So I'm thinking that the live food and the bacteria in the live food is what's keeping their immunity up, because my fish never get sick. Some of them are in there for over 20 years. They're all the paired fish are spawning, and they've never been sick. I don't think there's been a parasite in there in 30 years, 35 years.
Right.
And like this copper stuff I got here is probably from 1972. It's still full. It comes from the Bronx.
Anything from the Bronx has to be good, right?
I mean, the label is falling apart. That's how old it is. You know, it's from 19. It's got to be from the 70s. And the only time I use this is if I buy a fish real cheap that has parasites. Sometimes I get a fish that's covered in parasites for like $5. I recently got a copper band butterfly for $5, covered in parasites.
Yeah.
You put some of this in there and some quinacrine hydrochloride, and you run a diatom filter, and in a couple of days it's cured.
Mm-hmm.
And then you could do whatever you want with it. So you can get a lot of fish very cheap if you know how to cure them and you know how to keep their immune system up.
Right.
But I'm pretty sure it's the live food, and my best live food that I have is worms. Can you see any worms in there?
Yeah. Like those little worms.
I use worms every day. Those fish in that tank have eaten worms every day. And besides the worms, they eat clams.
Right.
I buy these chowder clams, they call them in New York. I mean, in Kentucky, you probably can't get them.
You had to go some special place to get those flown in, most likely, in the middle of the country.
Right. But over here, we get chowder clam, buy them live. And I just freeze them, and I shave off paper-thin slices.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, the only thing I feed the fish is live worms, clams, newborn brine shrimp.
Right.
And some frozen mysis.
Right.
And in all of those foods, there's bacteria in the gut. If you feed flakes, pellets, and freeze-dried food, that food is sterile. And if you quarantine a fish for 72 days, like a lot of people recommend, and then you feed it all that sterile food, fish has no immune system at all. I mean, I think if you sneeze in a tank, they'll get the plague or something. They have no immune system at all.
Right.
So that's my theory on immunity.
Right. It's the problem a lot of people get with fish. coming in a pet store, that fish has probably hadn't been fed properly for maybe a week or 2 weeks, and they're anything's in their guts completely gone. Any bacteria that's in their guts.
That's true. But the fish that you buy in a pet store was probably in the ocean a week or two before.
Right.
Because they don't hold them very long. So they take the fish out of the ocean, they put it in a holding place for a while, then they give it to the wholesaler, then they give it to the fish store. It probably takes about 12, 15 days before the fish gets to you. That fish is probably still has immunity in its cells. Because it just came out of the ocean. I mean, the immunity's probably not really working too good. His immune system's not working because, like you said, they haven't been fed. But they're still probably immune. I don't know how long immunity lasts, but it probably lasts a few months. I don't think it goes out of their system right away. So if you take that fish, whether it has parasites or bacteria, whatever it has on it in a weakened state, and you put it in a tank, maybe not your reef tank, but you put it in a tank and you feed it live foods like worms and clams and things like that, in a couple of days, it should get back to health, and its immune system will start to work again, and it'll be fine. Like all of them fish in there are. Because now a lot of times I'll buy a fish, like I bought 3 shrimp fish not too long ago. I'll buy a fish, and in a day or two, it'll be covered in parasites. As a matter of fact, most of the time, if I buy a fish, I'll see some parasites on it the next day or 2 days later. And then I feed it the worms and everything, and then they disappear. I never had any outbreak of anything.
Right.
And the only thing it could be is immunity. I don't know what else it could be. There's nothing different in that tank than anybody else's tank, except that there's some mud from the ocean in there too, and some natural seawater.
It's also having a more stable tank and a more what I would call there's no real big threats for the fish in the tank in your tank compared to, say, in a store tank where there's a bunch of strange fish being dumped in their holding systems all the time.
Nothing's going to be healthy in a store.
Right.
And stores lose probably 40% of their stock if you don't buy it right away.
That's right.
I think those fish in the store still have immunity in their bodies if you can get the fish healthy enough to use it, because their immunity, a lot of their immune system is in their slime. And that's why fish exude slime from a lot of places. And their skin is alive. Our skin is dead. And their living skin and their living slime has antibodies in it that repels and could kill parasites. Nobody speaks about that, but that's what their slime is for. The slime works in a couple of ways. First of all, it's slippery, and it's water soluble. So as the fish swims, the parasites that are stuck to it slough off in a thing. They just fall off because it's slippery.
Right.
And if they scratch in the gravel or something like that, the parasites come off. But the parasites evolved with the fish, so the parasites know how to get through the slime if they can stay on there long enough, and then they get to the skin, and if they're lucky, they get into the gills. But if they stay on the slime long enough, and if the fish is healthy, it has immunity to those parasites, and it just kills them.
Right.
And that's why they don't get sick in my tank.
Have you ever had any trouble with what's your thoughts on fish parasites of the lice, fish lice, or that kind of stuff?
Well, those things are thicker than the slime coat.
Right.
like egg and velvet and all of that. That's the slime coat is thicker than those parasites, so they can get underneath the slime coat, get completely covered with. But the things you're talking about, they're thicker than the slime coat, and they can hang on.
Right.
A lot of those, some of those are like a quarter-inch thick. I mean, they got them on whales a foot long.
Right.
You have to physically catch the fish and take it off with a tweezer.
Right. I've gotten some of those things from like live rock back in the day when you get live rock fresh from the ocean, and you see these big almost like ticks floating, and it'd get on a fish, kind of grab on there, and that's always scares the heck out of people when you see one of those great big things stuck on the side of a fish.
All the rock at that tank I collected in the ocean at one time. Me and my wife are divers. We used to go to the Caribbean, Hawaii, every place. And in those days, you just carry it home in your lap.
Right.
Now they shoot you if you went on a plane with the stuff on your lap.
Yeah. Might
blow
up.
Over the years, I started making my own rock because it's much nicer looking than the stuff you can buy. Because when you buy a rock, they just throw it up on a barge and all the pieces break off of it and you end up with like bowling balls.
Right.
So if if you make it yourself, you can make it with all protrusions and everything. You can make holes for the coral, and it's much nicer if you make it yourself. And the rock I make is hollow. So being hollow, it has a lot of area for anaerobic bacteria because it's hollow and there's almost no circulation inside of it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it works good for for growing bacteria.
Right.
And of course, I run a reverse under gravel filter. I think I'm the only one.
You are. You're the professional.
I don't know why.
For some reason, you do.
I don't know why. Well, I run that because that's what we had in 1971. It was no other filter.
Right.
It was a regular under gravel filter, and then I reversed it a few years later. But that's what there was.
Right.
And then the Dutch Mini system came out, and the Jabart, whatever his name is, system, and all these wet dries and all these things come out. But I stayed with the reverse under gravel filter, and it seems to work fine.
Right. I remember running one of those with power. Do you use power heads on yours, or using just?
There's a power head in the water behind the rocks
with
a sponge filter on it, and that pumps the water above the. I can show you. That pumps the water above the.
And we're taking a trip.
We're taking a trip. Okay. Now, can you see that silly thing in the back right there?
I see the light.
Well, let me move the light.
Move your light up. There we go.
Can you see that thing in the back with the tube on it?
Right. We see the thing in the back with the tube on it.
That's the it's like a plastic canister, and water gets pumped into that, and then it goes by gravity down into the 3 under gravel tubes. And it's a 6-foot long tank, so there's a tube every 2 feet, and and it goes underneath there.
Right.
But it has to be run very, very slow.
Right. You can't blow it up too fast to the bottom.
No, people think that you're going to blow the detritus out of the tank, but that's not going to happen.
No.
That would be nice, but that's not what happens. Let me close the light so you don't get blind.
And his fancy hood closer there.
Yeah, that's a screen door thing.
But yeah, what I've always found with that kind of system, it filters water back up through the bottom, so it gives a little bit of a upflow of water through the whole system, and helps out a lot.
It's going so slow. It's going very slow. It's 150 gallons an hour through each tube, which is like nothing.
Right.
It's just enough to give it circulation, so you don't grow hydrogen sulfide in there.
Right.
And if the problems with under gravel filters years ago was people pumped them real fast, and in a few weeks they got full of crud.
Right.
Between gravel.
They get blocked up.
And then the tank would crash. Forget it. It stunk, and you get hydrogen sulfide, and it crashed. But this thing here runs very, very slow. And I think it runs so slow that any detritus in the gravel would deteriorate before it even had a chance to block.
Right. And, you get we're using look like an old Magnum canister filter you had. Was that what?
Yeah, it's an old hang-on back filter. I don't
know. Right. Those old Magnum, Greenland Magnum.
Probably from the 60s or something, where I got it from.
I used to use those a lot to make stuff with.
Yeah, they're hard to come by now.
Yeah, they are hard to come by.
Yeah, I use these things for everything, these little plastic containers.
Right.
These used to be photo cubes. You remember there was a sponge in there and you put pictures around them?
Yeah.
That's what these are.
You got to use whatever you got at hand. That's what I always tell people.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and this is the brine shrimp hatchery.
Yeah. Add 2 photo cubes.
Well, I made this, but you could make it out of 2 photo cubes. You put the eggs in one side, and then you put the cover on it. You open up the door. And the shrimp swim through to the other side.
And then you got a little bitty.
And then you open this valve here, and they come out.
All right, that's right. And then they just come out, and then that goes down in your little feeder that you feed the.
And then it goes into the feeder, yeah. The As a matter of fact, the mandarin is on the. Can you see the mandarin on the feeder now?
Yeah, I see him on there. He goes on it all day long, probably, don't they? They're
Yes,
on there.
him and the pipefish.
They're on there all day long, probably all day long, feeding all day long. But that kind of feeding's good because they get food when they need when they feel like they're hungry. Some fish have to eat all day long. And some fish can just get one meal here and there, but other fish have to have food constantly through the day. And
Yeah,
it's
people make them. It gets me sick when people want to feed those things pellets. You
uh-huh.
can't feed a mandarin pellets. I mean, they might eat it, but they're not going to live on it very long.
Right.
A lot of people think if they got a fish for a year or two, that's good. But a mandarin should live like 10 years. That's not too good.
Right. Yeah.
He's spawning. That one is spawning, and there's two.
The pipe fishes.
Pipes that are spawning.
Mm-hmm.
All the padfish are spawning. There's some bangais, the fire clowns, but the ones that are spawning that are eating the brine shrimp, those are considered difficult fish. The blue striped pipes, the mandarins, the ruby reds.
Right.
A lot of people think they're difficult fish, but they just don't feed them. They're not difficult. You got to feed them.
You got to feed them constantly. They're more of a all-day feeder kind of fish that has to have food at constantly. The way their system works is a constant feeding. Not just sit down and eat supper kind of thing.
If you autopsy one of those, they don't even have a stomach. They just got a short little tube, and what do you call those pods have to go through there all day long. No, they don't have a stomach like to store food like most other things.
Yeah, or like we would. I mean, a lot of people think they're like humans, and they got this. Fish have a certain, just a real short gut, and they don't really hold food like we do, or
Unless you're like a lionfish or a grouper or something that could eat a big thing and keep it for a couple of days.
Yeah, digest it over a couple of days, or like a great white shark might eat once a week or something. Yeah. Well, it depends on where you're in New Jersey at. You're right. What shore that you're on? The great white might get a good few bites there every once in a while.
They normally eat surfboards. Their favorite food is surfboards.
Yeah.
See surfboards with the bite taken
Yeah.
out.
But yeah, people have to realize that certain fish require food, constantly across the whole day, and so you have to make sure that's what makes it more difficult. I guess what I would say difficult fish to keep, because people start trying to feed it like pellets or frozen food, like you said, it might eat it, but they won't get enough.
Might eat, but I always tell people you could feed them pellets, but you got to feed them one every 10 seconds.
Yeah.
All day long. If you have a girlfriend, that might happen.
Yeah, might happen. The problem with what I have with pellets is that it more pollutes the tank than it does anything. You get these pellets floating around all over the place, and I'll watch them.
I'm not big on dry food because there's no oils in them, and there's no bacteria, live bacteria in them. I'm not big on live food.
I will feed them some, and just maybe once in a while I'll feed some pellets, but I only feed them maybe like 10 of them. So if I get a container of pellets, it might last me all year, because I just feed just a little bit. Because if I feed too much, I just see this big swirling mass of pellets going around one corner of the tank,
I do use some pellets. As a matter of fact, there's an automatic feeder in there, but I soak them in fish oil, cod liver oil.
Right.
Because I don't think pellets have any oil in them. And oil, to me, is the most important part of fish food. So I soak them in some fish oil, which stinks like hell. And if you let it soak overnight, it doesn't make an oil slick on the top of the water.
Right.
But I don't usually do it for the fish. I do it for the pistol shrimp, because they don't come out much for food. And I made a special pistol shrimp feeder.
Right.
This has a sharp point on it, so I could stick this in their hole and shoot pellets or the clams or whatever I want in there, because you got to feed them things too. I have a spawning pair in there of
pistol shrimps. And that's always good for brood.
I got these in all different sizes. I got 1 million of these. I supply these to Marine Depot.
And that's always a good thing to have, because you can get stuff right down to where the fish are at or where the shrimps are at. That's always good to help feed the fish properly or feed the shrimps properly.
I would never just put food in the tank. It's always fed with one of those things.
Right. because you got it.
You got to target feed everything.
Right. Now I do keep one of those little bitty a feeder ring in my tank. One of my quarantine tank right now has one sitting in it, and I leave it in there all the time because I have some fish that right now I've got two pajama cardinals in the tank, and one of them is chasing the other one all the time. So one of them likes to hide up behind the feeder ring, you know. He sits up there all day long, and then when the food, if I put the food in that feeder ring, then he'll pop down, get the food, and then go right back up to the spot. It'll keep the other cardinal from attacking him all day, you know. But I use a lot of like the feeder rings. I take one and make one out of a piece of PVC or something, and just stick it on an old magnet. I've got one of those newer innovative marine that feeder ring that they make now that's adjustable, and that's nice because you can adjust it a little bit and let just a little bit of it fall out, you know, and that's always helpful. I like to have a lot of different devices depending on what kind of fish are in the tank or what fish you have, because they all feed differently, you know, and that's one thing you learn.
That's why I use these squeeze thing feeders here. I have there's a couple of fish in there that never come out. The marine betta, he's never going to come out. So he's in he's in the front, he's under the rock, but he's not going to come out for food. So I have to shoot food in front of him with one of those things. And then there's a possum wrasse that's been in there for a few years. He never comes out. But he almost comes out, you know. So,
yeah.
But you gotta squirt some food over there, because otherwise he's never going to eat.
Right.
There's the Watchman goby. He only comes out a little bit, so you got to shoot food in his hole with the pistol shrimp. But those kind of fish, you got to target feed. If you just put food in the water, they're never going to eat.
Right.
The copperman will get all the food. You know, he's a big eater.
Right, and that's you know, you have to always think about that, and that's like you said about immunity. You got to think about what each fish that you get, then you put in your tank, what kind of food and how they're going to feed. Every fish is different, you know.
A lot of people are under the impression that fish need a variety. Fish don't need a variety. Fish eat one or two things in the ocean, and that's all they need. Like a lionfish eats fish. That's all he needs.
And they'll just sit there and eat that. He won't need anything else, you know.
That's all he needs is fish. You don't have to feed him anything else. A mandarin eats pods or newborn brine shrimp. That's all he eats. You don't need to give him anything else.
They're not looking for anything else.
Fish eat clams or worms.
Right. I mean, fish are pretty much, every fish has its own little specialty thing that they eat, you know, and you have to learn that, what they're looking for and what they'll eat is the main thing.
And the most important thing, another thing people miss, if you're feeding squid, octopus, fish fillets, scallops, shrimp, all of that food is not the best food, because that's only the tentacles you're feeding and the muscles. All of those foods I said, you're only feeding the muscles. You're not feeding any guts. When you feed squid, you're feeding the tentacles. Octopus, you're feeding the tentacles. Scallops, you're just feeding the muscle that holds the shell closed. If you feed table shrimp, you're just feeding the back part without the gut. None of those foods have guts in them.
Right.
When fish in the ocean, they eat the whole fish, the whole shrimp, the whole squid, the whole octopus, because they need the guts, not the parts we eat. You know, we eat the muscle.
Yeah.
I don't eat fish guts, but fish need the guts. That's where all the oil is. That's where all the vitamins, minerals, everything, and the bacteria from their digestive system is in the guts.
Right.
I think that's the biggest thing why so many people have so many diseases with the fish. They're not feeding the right stuff.
Right.
When you feed clams, you're feeding the whole clam, the guts, the eyelashes, you know, the toenails. You're feeding everything.
Right.
When you're feeding the worms, you're feeding the whole worm with the guts and everything that's in his stomach.
Right.
That's what they need. Brine shrimp, the same thing. If you feed newborn brine shrimp, you're feeding the yolk sac along with the guts.
Right.
You need, if you see a fish, if there's a dead fish anywhere, they're always eating the guts first before everything else on the fish.
They don't mess with the head that much.
They don't mess with it's probably hard to eat anyway. But they eat the guts and the intestines and the liver and everything, because all the oil in the fish is in the liver. And oil is a major part of a fish's diet. That's another thing people don't realize. A fish has a liver about 20% of its body weight. So if the fish is 100 pounds, it's about 15 pounds of oil.
Okay.
Conflict oil, whatever you want to call it, fish oil. So when a shark eats a 100-pound fish, he's getting 15 pounds of oil. I mean, that's a lot of oil. When you feed flakes, pellets, and most food that you buy, there's almost no oil in there. But a fish's diet is about 10 to 15% pure fish oil. And that's part of their immune system. When a fish spawns, which they're supposed to do every month or so, if your fish are not spawning, they're not healthy. When a fish spawns every month or so, that spawn is almost all eggs. And a fish like that dopey little clown goby in there is about 3/4 of an inch long. That thing spawns every 10 days. And it's all oil. It doubles its weight, and it's oil. I mean, the only way he's going to get that much oil in him is to feed him worms or something with oil in him. He's not going to do that with flakes and pellets and, God knows what other people feed the fish.
Yeah, all this different freeze-dried stuff that you have.
Freeze-dried stuff, I think, is useless. I don't think that's.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's good for anything.
Mm-hmm.
I've used it in an emergency and everything, but
not something you mess with.
And people tell me, well, you got to look on the package. It has vitamins and minerals and all these different things in it. Yeah, it had that when it was live, maybe, but after you freeze-dry it, vitamin A, you can't freeze-dry that. It's oil. It goes bad when you freeze-dry it.
That's right.
And there isn't any oil in dry fish food because it goes bad and it stinks.
Mm-hmm.
So I take fish oil if I'm feeding pellets, say, to something. I take fish oil, I stick a pin in it and squeeze it on there. Sometimes it goes all over the walls, it goes on the mirror, it stinks like hell. But you drop it out on the pellets, you swish it around for a while, and it soaks in, and that's a great food. But pellets by themselves are not, and they can't put oil in pellets because it goes bad.
Right.
That's why they come in those little capsules because there's no air in there.
Right, and the oil can't be really given that way in a pellet or something like that. Like you said, you soak them overnight in your stuff.
Yeah, or a couple. I put like 20 pellets in one of these things dry. And I put maybe 3 drops of oil in there, and you shake it around, and then after a couple of hours, it all soaks in. And so when you put it in your tank, it doesn't make an oil slick.
Right.
If you put the oil in there right away and throw it in the tank, it's going to be all over the top of the float.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing you can't do is you can't put oil. A lot of people use Selcon and all these different things. You can't put that on wet food. People put it on worms and on freeze-dried food. And it just comes off in the water. As soon as you put it in the water, it comes right off. You can't put any kind of oil on a wet fish, on a wet food. It just falls right off.
Right.
So you're wasting your money unless you want to put it on a pellet or freeze-dried something.
Probably Selcon would probably work really good with in a pellet, like you said, with like the cod liver oil.
You can put it on a pellet, or sometimes you can get freeze-dried worms and put it. It soaks in good with that. But if you put it on frozen mysis or frozen clam or it falls right off. You're just wasting your money.
Yeah, you just wasted.
Selcon is good, but you want to get it in the fish, not in the water.
Right. You got to have them some way they get it. Otherwise, it'll just come off into the water, and you just get a nice little. Your protein skimmer will go crazy for a few minutes.
I sometimes inject that into feed a fish. Like when I used to keep lionfish and moray eels and stuff like that, I used to feed them guppies or grass shrimp. Right. And I used to take a hypodermic needle and inject the feeder fish with either fish oil or Selcon, and then feed it to the lionfish or whatever I was feeding.
Right, because most lionfish really don't do good eating like freshwater fish that much because they don't get any.
That's why if I couldn't get saltwater fish, I would inject guppies with cod liver oil.
Yeah, it's just not. They don't comprehend the ability. They have to have. If you got a lionfish, you got to feed it a saltwater fish or inject it with Selcon or something, so they get some kind of nutrition, because they won't get any nutrition out of a freshwater fish.
They live a while, but not very long. I collect a lot of grass shrimp. They're salt water, and I throw it in. But I don't keep lionfish anymore.
No. I don't like fish that have to spend all the day getting grass shrimp for them and throw them in there. Like the brine shrimp are not that big a deal, or messing with that. What do you think about green water and all that? Do you use any of that for your for nutrition, or no?
No. The only time I use green water is if I'm growing rotifers and if I'm trying to raise something. I don't raise fish anymore. But years ago, I used to hatch like clownfish and blue devils and different things, and you got to feed them rotifers until you could feed them to brine shrimp. And you have to feed those things green water.
Right.
That's green water you're talking about?
Right. That's right. Green water and rotifers. You don't really feed that much to a tank for fish, unless they're little bitty guys or something like that. Would you think?
No. The only thing you'd use rotifers for is the newborn fish. I mean, those blue striped pipefish I got in there spawn every few weeks, but I don't think you could see those babies with a microscope. I've never seen. They're always pregnant, but I've never seen the babies. I mean, the pipefish alone are only about
That
an
long,
inch,
little
inch and
bit.
a half long. You know, I don't think you could see the babies.
No, at least not with
Might be
your
punching
eyes.
the underground filter. I don't know.
Not with your eyes, right? You had to get some better glasses to
Yeah.
be able to see the things, you know. But
I use this thing for the to strain my
yeah,
brine shrimp, my baby brine shrimp,
uh-huh.
and rotifers. This is, I think it's for rotifers. It is. When I used to hatch fish out and try and raise them, I used to use this thing to strain the rotifers out of the water.
Right.
You get this in Florida aqua farms, and this is what I use for the brine shrimp.
Get your brine shrimp out, and then you put them into the top thing, and they kind of just
I
filter
put them in
down
that.
the tube.
Yeah, I put them in that silly thing with one of these things here.
Uh-huh.
I put a little bit of water in there, about a tablespoon of water, and it goes down into that
The
uh,
feeder.
that
Mm-hmm.
feeder. There's a nylon stocking on top of that, and the way that thing works is mandarins only eat from the bottom. If
Mm-hmm.
you throw baby brine shrimp in a tank, the mandarin's not going to see them because brine shrimp are attracted to the light, so they'll go to the surface.
Right.
The mandarin's going to starve. So the brine shrimp are attracted to the light, and the mesh on the top of that thing is white, so the shrimp, the baby brine shrimp, go up to the mesh, and they get stuck in there because they got
Mm-hmm.
these silly little swimmy things on the sides, and they get stuck in a net, and it takes them a while to get through. And while they're trying to get through, the mandarin just pulls them out of there, which he's doing now.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a female in there too, someplace.
She's not eating right now. She's somewhere else.
I don't know what she's doing, but
She's
she's over
taking a
there.
nap.
You want to keep those fish healthy and pregnant, you got to put a feeder in there like that. I don't think you could raise them any other way. Maybe you can. I don't
I
know.
don't think I've. I mean, we've seen where they've had ORA have the ones where they could eat frozen foods, and then they had to stop doing that because I don't think they had that much success with it long term for people, or
No,
they didn't
I
want to
mean,
spend the
unless you want
money.
to feed them all day long, they're not gonna.
Right.
I guess if you have a tank, I guess with nothing else in it, maybe you could get a dish of that, and maybe they'll eat out of it all day long. I don't know.
Yeah, because otherwise they eat so slow that the other fish would just eat everything out of it, and they'd just be sitting there looking at it like,
Yeah.
"What are you talking about?"
There's about 28 fish in there. I can't put that in there. They'll eat it in a second.
They'll be all over in a second, right?
Yeah, there's got to be about 28 fish in there. I don't
And
know.
so only the pipefish and the mandarins use the little feeder you have there. The other fish don't really pay attention to it, do they, anymore?
Well, there's the pipefish, the mandarins. There's a red scootablini, and there's a pair of ruby red dragonettes in there.
But those are the only fish that really mess with that feeder
Those are
like
the only.
that.
The copper band goes there too, but
Yeah,
he's wasting his time, because
he just
he
looks at it
goes
like
there, but he gets disgusted because the food's too small.
it's not big enough for him, huh?
Right.
So, well, I wanted to thank you for getting with us on this immunity thing and talking about fish foods. It's a very important topic, and it will help everybody keep a nice tank. And we'll talk to you next time, Paul.
My pleasure.
Okay, thanks.
All right, bye-bye.
And that's it. That's all we have to do, like that. How's that sound? That wasn't too hard, was it?
No, that was pretty easy.
I was going to get Todd straightened out, and we got to figure out that part of it. That would be handy. But, yeah, that's all.
How do I see this?